Greetings.
Greetings, brother. Greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. We're back at it. And I'm not really feeling all that good right now, so we're probably not going to do the full 4 hours. But I do want to get into the Department of Defense directive instructions, which is the next thing on the list after we got done with those 32 CFRs as it relates to purpose, applicability, and policy. Because that's all it is policy. So first of all, I want to remind everybody, please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. There's PayPal links down below for anybody that wants to share some love. And of course, there's a StreamYard link for anybody that wants to join the panel. And what we're going to do is pull up this document. And this is, make sure we got it, Department of Defense Instruction number 5015.02. And this was February 24th of 2015, incorporating change 1, August 17th, 2017. What we've got is the purpose. Much like we saw in the other one, this instruction reissues Department of Defense Directive DODD 5015.2 in accordance with the authority of DODD 5144.02 to establish policy and assign responsibilities for the management of Department of Defense records in all media, including electronic, in accordance with Subchapter B, Chapter 12 of Title 36, Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, and Chapters 29, 31, 33, and 35 of Title 44. And we're not going to get into those, but again, I'll drop the link for anybody that wants to do some research on that. And of course, then we get on to applicability, and the applicability, this is going to sound pretty familiar. And I don't know what these two orange dots are right here, but it shows them in the, see if I can copy that and post that. Yeah, it shows as a full colon stop. But on here, it's two orange dots kind of offset. But anyway, it says OSD, the military departments, the Office of the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Joint Staff, the combatant commands, the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, the defense agencies, the Department of Defense field activities, and all other organizational entities within the Department of Defense, referred to collectively in this instruction as Department of Defense components, DoD components. And that's the same language that they had in that 32 CFR as it relates to applicability. It's an identical language. DoD information created, received, collected, processed, maintained, disseminated, disclosed, or disposed of by or for the DoD in any medium or form, including information managed by Department of Defense or a third party on behalf of the Department of Defense. Hold on here, I'm pulling something else up. And the third party on behalf of the Department of Defense is under 32 CFR 1602.4 area office. Other regulations relating to national defense, Chapter 16, selective service. Area office, the selective service office. which is responsible for all administrative and operational support for the one or more local boards within its jurisdiction. For all administrative and operational support. This is telling us that the administrative courts are for the operational support of the Department of Defense, and they support them equally in return. That's why they have that military flag in that courtroom. It is a military jurisdiction. There cannot be any doubt. Policy. It is the DoD policy that the information and intellectual capital contained in DoD records will be managed as national assets. Intellectual capital is the informant that gave intellectual property to the Department of Defense at a military hospital through enumeration at birth, creating a legal name for their management of national assets. Effective and efficient management of records provides the information foundation for decision-making at all levels. Effective and efficient management of records provides the information foundation. The foundation of the information is the intellectual capital taken from mom and not given equal consideration in return and support of. Mission planning and operations, personnel and veteran services, legal inquiries, business continuity, and preservation of U.S. history. Records, regardless of media or security classification, will be created, maintained, used, disposed, and preserved to document the transaction of business and mission in wartime and peacetime. Records are evidence of DoD component organization, functions, policies, procedures, decisions, activities pursuant to references C and D, and will be maintained in accordance with guidance issued by National Archives and Records Administration. So we see no law and no reference to law. We see a directive as it relates to their policy. Nothing more and nothing less. Department of Defense records must be managed in compliance with this instruction and references C and D while protecting the legal and financial rights and interests of the federal government. Five CFR 575.102 as administrative personnel, Office of Personnel Management, Civil Service Regulations. This is the civil service side of the Department of Defense. Civilians are a part of the Department of Defense. It is the civilian side rather than the military side. Competencies means the knowledge, skills, abilities, behaviors, and other characteristics an individual needs to perform the duties of a position. Employee has the meaning given to that term in 5 U.S.C. 2105, except that the term also includes an employee described in 5 U.S.C. 2105C for the purpose of determining whether an individual was an employee of the federal government, during the 90-day period referred to in the definition of newly appointed employee also includes employee described in 5 USC 2105E. For the purpose of 575.109D, an employee means an individual not yet employed who has received a written offer to be newly appointed or reappointed and has signed the written service agreement required by 575.110 before payment of the recruitment incentive. So they have to provide a recruitment incentive in that one. Executive agency has the meaning given to that term in 5 USC 105. That's the one we talked about, department and agencies. They determine the executive agency in 5 USC section 1. This is section 105. So there are other sections that define other departments and occupations. Federal government, as we just read in the other one, the Department of Defense directive, as it says here, DoD records must be managed in compliance with instructions and references C and D while protecting the legal and financial rights and interests of the federal government and persons affected by U.S. government activities. And federal government means all entities of the government of the United States, including United States Postal Service and Postal Regulatory Commission, and therefore the Postal Service doesn't, federal government means all entities of the government of the United States, including the United States Postal Service and the Postal Regulatory Commission. So, the federal government and persons affected by U.S. government activities affected by the mails. Everything you receive in the mails is in fact a communication, which is a conveyance of a debt as it relates to intellectual capital and the commercializing of those data elements for sale otherwise. Essential records, formerly vital records, will be identified, protected, and managed to assure availability after an event that disrupts normal operations, to support continuity of operations and to protect rights and interests in accordance with reference C. All essential records will be identified. They never identify the living soul. Again, the individual's name and number identify the record according to 20 CFR 422.103. All DoD records will be covered by a records schedule. Approval of the schedules must be obtained from NARA, National Archives Records Administration, in accordance with reference C. So the vital records through the enumeration at birth are covered by schedules that are approved in the National Archives. So like I said before, the enumeration at birth is with the intent to eventually enter in to the National Archives. All permanent electronic records will be managed electronically for eventual transfer and accessioning to NARA in an electronic format. All permanent electronic records will be managed electronically for eventual transfer and accessioning to NARA in an electronic format. Sound records management principles must be incorporated into DoD business processes in accordance with the Department of Defense Chief Information Officer. Memorandum reference D in NARA Federal Enterprise Architect Records Management Profile and statutory requirements. 1. Records management requirements, issues, and solutions must be identified and linked to their implementing technologies. In order to implement the technology of the statutes and their business processes. Records management requirements will be integrated into DoD component information technology, governance process for portfolio management, risk management, capital planning, enterprise architecture, business process design, and system development. Never for you. Never. Never. The acquisition, development, enhancement of electronic information system and IT services must incorporate records management and preservation considerations, and any records contained in the systems or IT services must be managed in accordance with NARA approved records disposition schedules. I think that's all I've got about for this one, except for this release ability cleared for public release. This instruction is available on Directed Division website, And what they're doing is they're professing that once the records reach the National Archives and are ready to be released for public viewing, they've removed all of the private data elements. And therefore is nothing but a statistical record holding historical value and nothing else. And these are all the references. Then it shows the responsibilities. Chief Information Officer develops and establishes DoD policy and standards to implement a DoD records management program, including the life cycle management of records in all media in accordance with references B, C, and D. Oversees DoD records management, serves as the DoD senior agency official for records management. So the Chief Information Officer has to be a rather intelligent man, you would think.
So I guess it'd be safe to say that all of these people in government are false and misleading in their representation, which, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Absolutely, and that's because they've been indoctrinated to believe the same thing. They
Right.
don't know that they're part of the military as a civilian. That's a military arrangement, as we saw in the earlier video. That's an arrangement in a trust. It's a civilian capacity wherein in that civilian capacity, you're operating a record system.
Yep.
So again, if you're living your life on truth, you don't need it to be recorded so you can remember it. You don't need to write it down so others can know it. You just continuously state it and act the same way, bringing the duplication of the records together. The records of your deeds and the records of your words should match. The record of your words matching the record of their words isn't a duplicate. It's a confusion. It's an association through a false, fictitious legal arrangement. And it's never true. Never. I wouldn't be so bold to state that on this internet in these records if I didn't firmly believe them to be false. And again, I'll reiterate, comment in etymology, whether written or spoken. Comments literally mean invention, fabrication, and fiction. So prove otherwise. It's pretty much an impossibility again. So let's take a look at the next one. As we spoke of intelligence, because we're talking about the chief information officer. And as I said, he must be pretty intelligent. And so what we have here is Office of Naval Intelligence. Now, why would we go to the Office of Naval Intelligence? Because everybody considered a citizen of the United States is considered in etymological terms to be a knave, a knight, a member of the military. The knave, as it relates to the navel and the umbilical cord, and the nativity, and being native to the land and not to some fiction. The Office of Naval Intelligence is America's premier maritime intelligence service and a core element of the U.S. Navy's information warfare community. It is a spiritual war. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. ONI possesses unmatched knowledge of the maritime operating environment and delivers penetrating understanding of threats to America's security and the national decision makers and the fleet. When you buy an automobile, it's done through an automobile manufacturer at an automobile dealer by an automobile salesman, yet it is considered on the documentation as a fleet vehicle. Established in 1882, ONI is the nation's longest serving intelligence agency. ONI is a core element of the Navy's information warfare community, whose goal is to gain and hold a decisive information advantage over America's potential adversaries. Now, what I want to pose here is that this is being used negligently. The information is being used negligently against the people, dumbing them down and creating adversaries within the own American society, causing people to rise up in arms and protest, burn buildings down, things like that. It's creating adversaries of the very people that these operational mechanisms are supposed to protect. Pretty sickening that it's 2023. This program has been around since 1882. Public education has been around since 1840. And yet, I seem to be one of the few that has done his diligent research to find this stuff and point it out. And again, it goes to show how delinquent our public education system truly is. Because if the public education system was truly a benefit to the American people, it would teach them how to stand in a proper position so that America as a whole can subdue its adversaries. But right now, America as a whole, with half of its population illiterate to a certain degree, maintaining only a 7th or 8th grade reading comprehension. The average reading comprehension of American society is 7th or 8th grade. If you've only got the 7th or 8th grade reading comprehension, but you can still comprehend the trust law and how it works, you should still be able to operate within this system, no problem. So the fundamental element missing in that public education system isn't the fact that they teach us education of the English language and don't extend it farther into 24th grade like these lawyers do, but rather that the fact that they don't teach trust law, which is the true law of the land. It's learning how to write your contracts so that you can be trusted. That's all it is. And again, going to that legal name, That's a legal trust establishment, and it's all on paperwork. It's all on paperwork. There is no crime in it. The crime is the action of creating false paperwork. So that's why we correct the record. That's why it's important to protect the record. As Americans, we don't want it to make us look stupid. Okay. ONI collects, analyzes, and produces maritime intelligence and disseminates that intelligence rapidly to strategic, operational, and tactical decision makers to meet Navy, DoD, and national requirements. Our integrated workforce of active duty and reserve naval and civilian professionals support combat operations and provides vital information for planning America's defense against maritime threats at home and around the world. Now, when they speak of the maritime threats, they're speaking about the territorial threats around the borders, the coastal waters and the inland waters. That's what they're talking about, the maritime. The maritime in our aspect here in the contract is the commercial maritime transactions that take place across those borders. In order to cross that border at the coastal boundary, you have to place some kind of contractual data elements into the United States knowledge database so that they can say, okay, we trust you. Use maritime intelligence on naval weapons and technology proliferation, transnational threats, and civil maritime counter-proliferation.
No,
Counternational. Counter narcotics and global maritime environment and other activities that directly support the U.S. Navy and other activities that directly support the U.S. Navy, joint warfighters and national decision makers and agencies. Notice there is no capitalization on the national decision makers. What is a national decision maker? Well, I'm a national decision maker if I decide I'm not a national. I made that decision. Somebody else made a decision that when I was born, I was a national. And this is in direct conflict with the scripture. This is why it's so important to dig into this information and find out what's going on. Because once you do and you find out how all of it's conflicting with scripture, the passport conflicts with scripture, the driver's license conflicts with scripture, the nationality thing conflicts with scripture. It all conflicts with scripture. So you either bring the law or you subject yourself to the legal conundrum of deciding who the fuck you really are. The next one, as it relates to intelligence again, is the military intelligence. U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Records Repository, military intelligence. You have naval intelligence, you have military intelligence. Army Regulation 381-45, effective May 19th, 2023. This publication is a major revision. The authority of this regulation is DODM mandate, Department of Defense mandate 5240.01. Applicability. This regulation applies to the regular Army, the Army National Guard of the United States, and U.S. Army Reserve, unless otherwise stated. What is the Army National Guard as opposed to the Army National Guard of the United States? Well, the Army National Guard of the United States is the U.S. military under the Commander-in-Chief, and they are all under the Army National Guard, which is the militia. The militia directs the Commander-in-Chief, under which the Army National Guard of the United States sits. Proponent and exception authority. The proponent of this regulation is the Deputy Chief of Staff, G2. The proponent has the authority to approve exceptions or waivers to this regulation that are consistent with controlling law and regulations. The proponent may delegate this approval authority in writing to a division chief within the proponent agency or its direct reporting unit or field operating agency in grade of colonel or the civilian equivalent. So even in the civilian forces, you have equivalencies to the stripes of a military officer. Activities may request a waiver to this regulation by providing operating agency, or excuse me, by providing justification that includes a full analysis of the expected benefits and must include formal review by the activity's senior legal officer. Everything is a legal setup. Every piece of document through the military extension is a legal document in commerce provided through a trust. All waiver requests will be endorsed by the commander or senior leader of the requesting activity and forwarded through their higher headquarters to the policy proponent. They cannot issue law, folks. The law is set already. It is as set. What is what is done is what ought be done. There is nothing new under the sun. That is as set. That is the true asset. The knowledge, knowing that things are not going to change. You can't change me as a child of God. Yeah, you can murder me. You can kill me. You can stab me with a knife, and I will no longer live. But you cannot change the facts. Army internal control process. This regulation contains internal control provisions in accordance with Army Regulation 11-2 and identifies key internal controls that must be evaluated. Suggested improvements. Users are invited to send comments and suggested improvements on DA Form 28 or 2028, recommended changes to publications and blank forms via email, U.S. Army Pentagon. So like I said, I've been in communication with the Pentagon. And it's in relation.
I'm sure that was an interesting conversation.
Well, it was email. And I don't know why it's doing this again, but it won't let me copy paste. And there's that in the comments section below. Let me do something else. Let me do it this way. See if we get the whole address there. That way you can copy paste and it shouldn't be cut off. There we go. And what happens under this is I can take any form, and like I've said before, line item veto and overwrite it and send it in. This here is telling me I can suggest those improvements so that the American people won't be duped in these deceptive forms. So that when they come across the thing about United States citizen or resident, there's an explanation in there on what a citizen or resident is. No longer allowing it to be obfuscated in such a code that has 8 million different codes. Intelligence and security records. When you create a security instrument, it's because you're using security records. Purpose: the U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Records Repository is a department of the Army Records Center serving as the repository for intelligence, counterintelligence, human intelligence, personnel security, questionable intelligence activity reports, and other records that meet criteria of this regulation, such as enumeration at birth. This regulation establishes policy, assigns responsibilities, and establishes requirements for the operation of the USAISRR, identifies the categories of material authorized for custody in the USAISRR, provides policy and procedures for the storage, maintenance, transmission, review, and reduction of these records, establishes a requirement for digitation and automation of databases and records, and specifies procedures for the Department of Defense and other organizations requesting access. Other organizations requesting access. Remember this nice little thing. This is the vital records and vital statistics in the United States. Uses, users, systems, and sources of revenue. Sources of revenue. Sources of revenue. Not resources, sources of revenue. Conduct for the National Committee on Vital and Health Statistics Subcommittee on Population Health. However, what we find is that there's a vital records and vital statistics in the United States, users, user system, and sources of revenue. And figure 1 is a current birth registration process for a state vital records jurisdiction. A state vital records jurisdiction, which is exclusive to each legacy heir born wherein that record is created of the legal name, and it is exclusive. Over here, when it relates to the death certificate, we have the federal, this is NAFIS. All that information that goes into NAFIS, and federal and state government has 20 users that exchange money back and forth. Federal and state government, private sector, 11 users. And that's all through the state health department. Okay, so those are all the medical records, the government medical associates, and the private medical associates. Health researchers, federal government, academic institutions, researchers, healthcare organizations, etc. Says many users. Down here it clarifies LADMF certified users are greater than 500. There are over 500 and some 30 odd users according to these numbers that say there are many users here. So there's many more than just the 531. This is the problem. The information is disseminated so widely. And all of those different hands, nobody knows what the other hands are doing. And they're only limited to the information that they can use in their use. But in that, they then turn around and as a conglomerate say, well, you're subject to the United States, you're a United States citizen. We get to use that information, and we got it from the Social Security Administration. Because you said you're a United States citizen. Not them. They'll never claim that you're a United States citizen. Only the dummy on the other side of the counter, the one that really doesn't know, the one that's indoctrinated just like us, will sit there and say, you're a United States citizen. You're a resident of the state. It applies to you. Because they too are convinced that they're a United States citizen, that they're a resident of the state. Many of them believing that it's true because they are. They're operating in that capacity as a federal, state, or municipal officer or agent. And that agent is the contractor, as we saw in the one earlier. Federal government, is federal employee or contractor, and you're equally across the board considered a contractor, an agent, using a principal place of business as your residence while you dwell and rest from going out upon the world and working, and you maintain a set of records at your principal place of business. Keep filing those taxes and putting them in that file drawer, because that's going to prove that you're operating out of a principal place of business and that you are in fact operating as a contractor and don't have a valid contract. Like the gentleman posed earlier, that's what they're holding against us, is that we're acting as though we know what we're doing and we don't. And the record shows that we're not qualified because we were never elected to do such things. We decided to do so ourselves upon the indoctrination of both others in our lives and others not in our lives when we have these interactions. Oh yeah, well, the law says you got to do this. And then we just blatantly say, oh, okay, instead of doing the research to find out what it really says. So with that, I'm going to end it for tonight. Like I said, I'm not feeling good, so I'm going to take some time off and go get a good shower and see if I can get back into it. We'll have another one coming up tomorrow morning sometime, probably around noon again, and probably do the same thing, at least 4 hours to try to get through the rest of what we've got. I'm hoping we can make it, but if not, like I said, we'll continue on with another one later in the day. But I think I should be able to cover the rest of it in the next 4, 5, 6 hours. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll just get you some rest and hit me up and let me know, and I'll be around.
All right. Sounds good, brother. In the meantime, guys, remember, I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back or not. Be blessed. Have a good night, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye now.
Much love.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Much love.